Fort Casper, and Fort Casper, Wyoming. Wyoming Centennial Lasting Legacy Projects of Natrona County Schools Signature Cabin, 1990. The Signature Cabin was donated to the Lasting Legacy Project by Kathleen Henry, retired teacher who served in the Natrona County School District from 1927 to 1969. Casper Army Air Base. The summer of 1942 work was begun on an air base in the Casper area. In 4 months, 4,000 workers constructed 200 buildings, laid utility lines, built streets, and laid out runways heavy enough for the largest military planes. On August 15, 1942, the first plane landed at the base. The official opening was on September 1st, 1942. Major James A. Moore, a World War I veteran, was commanding officer. The base was built to handle 4,000 military personnel. It became a training area for B-24 Liberators. A massive range was created to the west of the base for bombing practice. The air base was officially designated as the Casper Army Air Base. The base served as a training center until it was closed on March 7, 1945. The field became the Natrona County International Airport. This replaced the first airport, Wardwell Field. Many former base personnel stayed in the Casper area, helping the city to prosper in the post-war years. Civilian Conservation Corps. The Casper Division of the Civilian Conservation Corps was arranged by the efforts of the Casper Chamber of Commerce in 1937. Work done by the CCC on Casper Mountain and at Alcova consisted of building bridges, improving roads, and reducing fire hazards. Their work included ground clearance, fencing, establishing picnic sites, and setting up waste disposal areas. The WPA finished the Fort Casper buildings in 1936, but CCC improved the parking area, created access roads, and needed something to the river bank. The CCC work proved of value to the community. Many Corps workers stayed in the Casper area, marrying into the community and providing leadership in all aspects of the growth of the city. The Corps was established to help young men secure training and provide jobs for unemployment caused by the Depression. The Corps ceased to exist with the advent of World War II. Most of the men in the CCC went to serve their country with honor. Eddsville. Eddsville, a mining ghost town, is situated 12 miles due south of Casper on top of Casper Mountain. It was founded by Charles E. Edds in 1891 after he had staked a 600 by 1,500 foot mining claim around a large spring. Word had spread that large deposits of precious minerals were found: gold, silver, lead, and copper. Lots were sold in the town in 1891 to 1892, and about a dozen cabins were built. Foundations of 3 cabins still remain today. Some 40 to 50 people lived there, hoping to find a bonanza of gold and silver. Some copper was mined, and the traces of gold and silver were found. Asbestos and feldspar were economically mined. The spar is still being mined today after nearly 100 years. The miners finally gave up and abandoned the town in 1905 to 1906. Numerous artifacts were uncovered in an archaeological excavation conducted in 1983 to 85. Eddsville is located in a beautiful mountain setting at an elevation of 7,800 feet. Casper, Natrona County State founding. On April 9, 1889, application was made to have the town of Casper incorporated. John Merritt made the application in Rawlins, Wyoming, since Casper was in Carbon County at that time. On July 8, 1889, Casper was incorporated and George Mitchell was elected as the town's first mayor. The first act to separate Natrona County from Carbon County was presented to the Wyoming legislation in 1888. The county was officially organized on April 8, 1890. Natrona County derives its name from the mineral natron, which is carbonate of soda. The territory of Wyoming was formed on July 25th, 1868, after separating from the territory of Dakota in 1869. The first territorial legislature passed the first women's suffrage bill in the Union, thus allowing women in Wyoming the right to vote. Wyoming became a state on July 10, 1890. The word Wyoming comes from a Delaware Indian word meaning upon the Great Plain. Salt Creek Oil Field. The famous Salt Creek oil field is located in Natrona County, 40 miles north of Casper. Representative Stephen W. Downey was the first man to acquire land at Salt Creek in 1883 after the discovery of the Jackass Spring oil seep. The Discovery oil well in the area was drilled in March of 1889 in the Shannon Pool. Mr. Shannon later built a small oil refinery in Casper in 1895 to process his oil. The main Salt Creek oil field was opened with the discovery of oil at the Dutch No. 1 location in October 1908. It initially produced 150 barrels of oil per day. As the field was developed and expanded, many of the Salt Creek wells were famous for being gushers. After 20 wells were producing oil in Salt Creek, Franco Wyoming Oil Company decided to build a 5,000 barrel of oil per day refinery on 20 acres located immediately east of Highland Cemetery. Transportation of large amounts of oil to the Casper refineries was a problem until the completion of 2 pipelines in December 1911. For some time, Salt Creek was the largest light oil field in the world. The Teapot Dome oil field of President Harding's tenure in the 1920s is located nearby. Railroads. The first passenger train arrived in this area on June 15, 1888 as part of Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad system at the site of an old town that would later become Casper, Wyoming. A depot was built after the tracks were extended from the old town at present A and McKinley Streets to the area of Center and Collins Streets. By 1891, extra cars were added in order to handle the traffic involved with mining ventures on Casper Mountain. The Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley, or locally called Wyoming Central Railroad, extended passenger service on to Shoshone, Riverton, and Lander by 1906. The line eventually became part of the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad system. The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, commonly referred as Burlington, reached Casper in October of 1913. The link through Wind River Canyon connected its Bighorn Basin line with the lines in southeastern Wyoming. Their depot in Casper was built in 1915 west of Casper. The consolidation of the parallel lines of the Northwestern and Burlington in 1942-43 made possible the salvage of 30,000 tons of rails for the war effort and the elimination of 87 miles of northwestern tracks. Burlington Northern now has 84.8 miles of track in Natrona County. This railroad was the distinction of being built from the west to east in Natrona County. Ellen L. Watson, Cattle Cate. On Saturday, July 20th, 1889, Ellen L. Watson, popularly known as Cattle Cate, was hanged with James Averill in Spring Canyon. The site is located 50 miles southwest of Casper near Independence Rock. Ellen and Jim had adjoining homesteads on Horse Creek, which flows through the Pathfinder Ranch. This energetic couple had built up a sizable herd of cattle, and Jim had established a roadhouse on the Sweetwater River located near the Oregon Trail in the Rawlins to Fort McKinley Stage Road. One story of this hanging is that Jim Averill was a saloon keeper who encouraged ranch hands to drink in corrals. Ellen, in this story, raised a fine herd of cattle by exchanging her favors for young cattle, appropriated by the ranch hands. The ranchers hung the two to rid the area of rustlers and troublemakers. Another story claims Averill and Watson homesteaded on prime water rights and were honest, law-abiding citizens. Jim and Ellen were hung because the ranchers felt the land that was homesteaded was their own grazing land and wished to obtain the valuable water rights. Goose Egg Ranch. The Goose Egg Ranch first received some notoriety notoriously, when Owen Wister featured it in his book, The Virginian. In the novel, this is where the cowboys exchanged the babies' blankets, and after the dance, the mothers carried home the wrong children. The ranch and house site were located 10 miles south of Casper on the north bank of the North Platte River at Bessemer Bend. The Searwright brothers built the house in 1883 and lived there until 1886. The lumber, hardware, and other materials used in the construction of the building was hauled by freight teams from Cheyenne, a distance of more than 225 miles. They then sold the ranch to J.M. Carey, a future governor of Wyoming. The beautiful stone home slowly deteriorated, and despite efforts by local historians to save the ranch house, the building was demolished in July 1951. Ranching in Wyoming. From Wyoming's very beginnings, and with the completion of the first transcontinental railroad, the livestock industry was anticipated to secure a viable economic base for the new territory. Most of the territory consisted of rangeland where buffalo herds had lived for centuries on the vast prairies. By the late 1870s, these grass-eating animals had been slaughtered close to extinction. The vast stretches of prairie were now open for cattle and sheep ranching operations, with Eastern and foreign investors supplying the money and the railroads providing transportation for the Eastern market. Only the labor to work the cattle was needed. That labor was supplied by the cowboy. Since the advent of the American cowboy, 20th century literature, music, and art has helped make the cowboy an American folk hero. Although the cowboy often receives more attention, the sheep industry has been a part of Wyoming history since territorial days. Following the cattleman's lead, vast numbers of sheep began competing with cattle for the valuable rangeland. This competition for the open range between cattlemen and sheepmen erupted with violence by the turn of the century. This conflict continued until the range wars stopped in 1909. The state's leading industry by 1908 to 1910 was wool production. Today, cattle and sheep graze side by side on many ranches in Wyoming, and the conflict between cattlemen and sheepmen is only a remembrance of Wyoming's frontier path. Bridger and Bozeman Trails. The discovery of gold in Montana in 1862 created a rush of miners traveling to Virginia City. The most direct routes were through Wyoming on the Bridger and Bozeman Trails. In the spring of 1863, John Bozeman, a miner from Georgia, pioneered a route leaving the Oregon-California Mormon Trail near Fort Fetterman and traveled east of the Bighorn Mountains through the Powder River country. This area was hunting grounds claimed by the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, who were determined to keep the white man out of this region. Except for Indian resistance, Bozeman's route was by far the easiest route to travel. Jim Bridger in 1864, aware of the Indians' determination to keep the immigrants out of the Powder River country, pioneered a route leaving the Oregon-California Mormon Trail west of Platte Ridge Station, traveling north through the Bighorn Basin and west of the Bighorn Mountains. Bridger's route passed through the friendly Shoshone and Crow lands. The Bridger Trail, though little used, proved to be a safe alternative to more dangerous Bloody Bozeman Trail. The determined resistance by the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho claimed many lives from 1863 to 1868, climaxing with the Fetterman disaster in December of 1866. The federal government consented to the Indians' demands with the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 by closing the Powder River country trails and forts. Pony Express. Today you stand where the Pony Express ran in 1860 to 61 when daring riders on swift horses carried the mail between St. Joe, Missouri and Sacramento, California. On January 30th, 1860, news release read, "Have determined to establish a Pony Express to Sacramento, California, commencing 3rd of April. Time, 10 days. Horses had been crossed half the American continent in 10 days. Stage stations such as Platte River Station became a Pony Express station, each averaging 12.5 miles apart. At these stations, tired horses were exchanged for fresh ones. Riders stayed at home stations, some 40 to 70 miles apart. Young riders signed on to become because of this San Francisco advertisement. Wanted skinny, wiry fellows not over 18. Must be expert riders willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. Wages $25 per week. Apply Central Overland Express. Despite the death-defying rigors of summer heat, winter blizzards, and Indian attacks, riders anxiously awaited the pony's first run on April 3rd. Mail pouches relayed from pony to pony at each relay station were shuttled across the 1,900 miles expanse on schedule, with letters and telegrams delivered on April 13th. Although it lasted a mere 19 months, it shall forever remain one of the truly remarkable feats of the Old West.